If you're watching this video today, you probably had a story given to you. You probably got involved with someone that you didn't know was toxic, or you didn't know was narcissistic, sociopath, psychopath, whatever. You got involved with someone who told you the story, who gave you an idea of a fantasy, of a reality that you wanted, of a reality that you thought was never possible, that was too good to be true. And as you got into this relationship, you ignored the idea of how fast it went, of how soon someone said I love you, of how soon things progressed, of how quickly people moved in with each other, whatever it might be. And you ignored a lot of things that in other people's eyes might have seemed weird, might have seemed strange. In fact, you might have had a friend or a family member or a coworker say, like, what's going on? Like, this looks a little weird. Like, you guys seem to be moving really fast. In the middle of love, in the middle of the heat of the relationship, the middle of the great sex, you're like, yeah, whatever. You don't know what you're talking about. You haven't experienced this true love. You haven't experienced this amazingness. And so you keep going. And you keep getting involved more and more with a relationship. And you think, hey, this is awesome. And then you start to notice it to change. The phone calls and the texts become less frequent. The interactions become less positive. The connection that was always there seems to have dissolved. And you're wondering, what's going on? All the time you have friends and family that are still gathered around that still see different aspects, but at that time you've already told them it's amazing. Like, back off. Like, stop telling me to go slower because this is absolutely amazing. And you get involved more and more and more, and the other person in the relationship starts pulling back more and more and more, and they make you feel like it's your fault. They start telling you you're crazy. Like, you're oversensitive with all these people I have on my Facebook. You're oversensitive when I compliment that person walking down the street. You really think you should be wearing that right now? You really think you're good? Like, you kind of look a little ugly today. And they slowly start to take you down and devalue you. And that pedestal that they put you up, that love bombing aspect of where they constructed and fabricated every single thing that you wanted to see, that you wanted to hear, that you wanted someone to tell you, the future that you wanted to see, the future faking of constructing, this is the reality of this is where we're going. This many kids, this place, we'll live here, we'll do this, and the list goes on and on. And you're like, wait a second, like, was I duped? Was I lied to? Was the whole relationship fake? The whole relationship was a story. The story that someone told you. And the problem with stories is over time, when they're repeated so often and they're repeated so many times, you start to believe them. And you start to think that fiction and fantasy become reality. A narcissist, a sociopath, a psychopath, a toxic person, doesn't matter, will develop a story for you to believe. It's almost like bait. If you go fishing and there's a worm or there's a special type of bait on the hook and it gets dropped in the water and you go for it, and the fish swallows it, hook, line, sinker, all the way. They believe the whole thing. Because in that moment, it was projected to be the reality that it thought it was. It thought it was food, so the fish went after it. You thought the reality was real, so you went after it. The problem was that reality was constructed and fabricated by a person who didn't have your best interest in mind, but had their image, their control, and their own interests. So as a result, you get sucked into a relationship and you get left holding nothing and wondering, was it actually nothing? And it's made up of the stories that we believe. You see, all of us, narcissistic, healthy, codependent, non-codependent, like no matter what, all of us believe the stories that we're telling ourselves. You tell yourself stories every day. You tell yourself thoughts every day. You tell yourself facts every day. You tell yourself so many things on a day-to-day basis. We're built up of the positive or the negative speech that we interact with ourselves. We're built up with how we interact with other people, what we think those other people are thinking about us, how we interact, how we see the world, that perspective. And it becomes a story that we tell ourselves. Maybe you have a story in your life that was built early on from an abusive relationship, from an uncaring parent, from a over-controlling parent, overbearing parent. And that story was told to you early on. It doesn't have to be an actual story. It doesn't have to be an actual thought. You could learn this by interacting with parents, with friends, with community. And you grow up thinking a certain way, thinking a certain thing, and that's that story that's in your life that controls your perspective. And then you get with a narcissist or a toxic person. They walk into your life and they start to control your perspective. They start to control the narrative on the story you have. And they typically do that by creating a trauma bond, by creating future faking, by gaslighting, by lying, by manipulating. And they start constructing a story that looks believable, that you latch on to because it sounds too good to be true. It sounds great, so you want to hold on to it as tight as you can so you don't lose it. But the problem is that story is false. Then as the relationship continues to go, that fake story at the very beginning turns into another story. At this point, this is where people disconnect some of the ideas. The original fake story, the fake future, this is our future, this is our life, this is our marriage together, that dissipates. And people are like, wait a second. If that's the fake story, then what I'm getting told now is the real story. But what's the story that gets told now? You're fat. You're ugly. You're disgusting. You're oversensitive. You're insecure. No one would want to date you. Who would want to date a single mom? Who would want to date someone like you? You're never going to find anybody like me. The stories that you get told here are the most destructive ones that you can ever believe. And the stories that you start putting in your head, in your mind, that you don't even realize that they're lies, you don't even realize that they're manipulation, and you start to believe, this is what I deserve. I deserve this abusive relationship. I put up with it so long. Maybe this is what I get. Maybe this is all that there is. Maybe this is love. Then you start to believe a story and a fabrication. What I want to tell you today is you have to take a look at the stories that you're telling yourselves, and you have to put them with facts to say, am I believing truth? Because if you're with a narcissist, if you're with a toxic person, the odds are you are not believing truth and that there is nothing truthful about the situation that you're in. What stories are you believing today? They're not easy to find. They're not easy to describe. They're not easy to put words around. They're not easy to be able to peel back the layers and say, hey, this is what my story is. I work with people on a day-to-day basis to figure out what their story is. Sometimes it can be as fast as 10 minutes. Sometimes it can be as long as an hour. Sometimes it takes time to be able to get down. And sometimes when people peel back all the layers, they get honest, they get vulnerable, and they say, wow, this is actually what I'm thinking in this moment. That I'm not good enough. That I didn't love best enough. That I could have changed something. That I need to go back because of this reason. The list goes on, and all of a sudden they realize that's what I was thinking. And I'm like, yeah, now let's take it. Let's put it up on the whiteboard and let's say, how does that balance and match up to the facts, to the truth of the situation? My goal with working with people in one-on-ones, in coaching sessions, is to try to get them to the place where they understand how to deal with these thoughts and deal with these stories and break them down and put them on trial when it comes to truth and facts. And as people do that and they recreate and they rewrite and they change the story, they change the lie that they're believing, they balance it up against the facts, and then they're like, wait a second, let's come up with a new story, the actual story, the truth about the situation. We take that, we put that up in their mind, and then we start going over it every single day. And they start applying it in every single aspect of their life that says, wait a second, I am worthy, I am good enough, I'm not going back to this person because of X, Y, and Z, they manipulated me, whatever it might be. That new story goes there, so when they get triggered by those feelings, by those emotions, by the triggers that pop up, by the taste, smell, seeing other people, visiting other places, whatever it might be, when those things pop up, they're like, wait a second, I've done the work. Let me review the story that's based on the truth, that's based on the facts. Because the truth will set you free every single time. Got people that I talk to every single day that they either want to get past the situation or they want to walk through it. And the ones that walk through it and put in the work on a day-to-day basis, dissecting the triggers, dealing with the emotions, the feelings, finding out the thought underneath, putting the facts up to it, and making a new story to rewire their mind, those are the people that get free the fastest. Those are the people that get free the most when they're able to work through that process on a day-to-day process. I encourage people to do that. I walk with people through that on a day-to-day basis. I try to give the tools so that you can do it on a day-to-day basis as well. I give people the formula. I give people the step-by-step guide of, hey, this is how we're going through it. If you're not interested in talking one-on-one, I've got it on the app, on the Narc app, where you can actually text back and forth with yourself, basically. But you text back and forth through a program, you put in an email at the very end, it sends you an email back with all your responses. It says, hey, this is what you've been believing. These are the facts. This is the story. Now go and change your story. Because we're all made up of the stories we believe. What story are you believing today?